what do you find these people that are getting divorced?
We know this divorce in the last 6 or 8 months. We've got to get that house on the market by May 1 or April 1 or whatever y'all recommend. I know the summer's a hot month.
Make sure you freeze your credit report. If it's not already frozen, freeze it. Because if you're going to need a loan, the lender's going to look at your credit history, and they don't care if you're going through a divorce. They're going to just say, well, you weren't able to manage your credit through that situation. You're not a good risk.
My office, my team knows how to handle those situations.
Don't always think that the most expensive attorney means the best attorney. First, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who's joining us today, taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. So this is our panel of experts. I'm Jessica Nelson. I am one of the mentors with eXp. We decided to put this on because we see that a lot of people, what are the reasons why they're selling nowadays? When you guys are talking to sellers, it's usually a life event, right? People aren't just saying, hey, I want to sell my house because, or I'm just looking to upsell. Most of the people you're talking to right now who are serious about selling, it's one of 5 things: divorce, death, relocation, short sale, financial distress, or they're carrying 2 mortgages and they need to get rid of one. So Armando and I decided that we were going to put together this learning series for all of you so that you could really learn how to become an expert in each one of those niches. All right, so we're going to get started with the questions. We have a couple of questions written out, but we're also going to open it up for Q&A, so you guys can ask any questions you have too. This is for Kevin, and the question is the decision to sell agreed upon by both parties? Okay. And this will also go to Nick after Kevin.
Actually, so that's actually, I'm sorry, Jessica, that's actually part of the answer. So the question is, what are some questions that you ask someone going through a divorce when they're selling their home? But before I answer that, I think if I was on your side of the panel, the first question I would ask the realtor is, where do you find these people? Right? You guys are here to increase your business, and you want to. So where do you find these people that are getting divorced? And so I'll tell you, you go to the Facebook group, I'm recently divorced and looking for a realtor. Don't write that down. That was a joke. There's no such thing. Okay? I wish there wasn't easy. I wish it was that easy.
You surprised. There is actually a Facebook group, Are We Dating the Same Guy?
Right. No, there's not. I wish it were that easy. But so the short answer is, you find these people the same way you find any people. You put yourself in front of prospects daily. Like some of you experienced realtors know, if you survive 5 years or 10 years, you know that the secret is the secret to everything. Get out of your house and get in front of prospects every single day. And then you come to events like this so that you have the knowledge to win the listing, to impress those people. So when that person walks into your open house and says, this woman walks in and says, yeah, I'm just looking for a 3-bedroom because I'm going through a divorce, then you can start asking the questions that's going to show that person you know how to deal with this. And so when I go through the questions on what to ask, these aren't necessarily questions that you need the answer for. These are questions that you need to know that they have the answer for, right? So yeah, is the decision to sell agreed upon by both parties? That's good to know. And look, when someone walks into your open house or you meet someone at a happy hour or whatever, and they say, this is a really difficult time, you really got to kind of work it in. Some people will come right out and just start spilling their guts about how bad the divorce, and you can maybe get some of these in. And sometimes you really got to dance around the issue. But one thing you do want to know is you want to make sure that both parties have agreed to sell. I mean, you don't want to, you're wasting your time otherwise. And that they've, they've discussed the terms of the sale with their divorce attorneys, if they even have one involved. Some people will come in and say, we're thinking about getting divorced, or we're getting divorced, but they haven't done anything yet, right? So how are profits divided? That's real easy, but you want to make sure they've at least thought about how losses will be divided and how expenses are going to be divided that come up during the sale. So they all will know how they're going to divide the loss, 50-50 or whatever, but they need to at least have thought about, when they get the contract, the buyer comes back and says, we need a new roof, and they've got a $6,000 deductible. Just make sure that they've already kind of have a plan on how that's going to be handled, because that could be a deal breaker if they haven't at least thought it through. Are both parties going to be available to sign? Is it a contentious divorce? Is it amicable? What the timeline is? how am I going to communicate with you? Usually at first you might be just dealing with one person, the wife. How do they want you to communicate with them? Are there any specific, if they've gotten this far, are there any specific agreements or conditions that need to be adhered to in the divorce agreement? Not necessarily any of your business, but you need to just make sure that they've thought that through and that because that's a question that the title company is going to want to know too.
Can you repeat that, Kevin?
Are there any specific terms or condition that need to be adhered to according to the divorce agreement?
Okay, so what are some examples of that?
Maybe our attorney could answer that.
I have a divorce decree right now to where at closing, which is why I need the sales price. They haven't agreed on the adjusted sales price, but once I get the adjusted sales price, there's a calculation that I have to do to regards the net proceeds. I have to take 10% of the top, give it to the husband, and then from the rest is another calculation I have to do, but that's all listed in the divorce decree.
Gotcha.
Like that.
So, if the wife says, "I want all the family heirlooms, all the jewels," and the husband says, "That's fine, but it's going to come out of your portion of the profit from the house sale," all of that is a part of the divorce decree.
Usually personal property like that, I don't have anything to do with, just that part that involves the real estate.
As far as, you're both right. I mean, that's part of the negotiations is this asset for that. You're dealing with retirement assets. They're dealing with investments, sometimes companies, which is a big pain in the divorce process, and then real estate. Sometimes it's a rental house or 4 rental houses and the marital residence. Usually it's just the marital residence. And it could be any number of calculations. Like you probably see the craziest calculations.
Yes, sir.
But a lot of it has to do with all the rest of the negotiations because there's 2 big pots to divide, the retirement and the house. And I mean, I'm deviating a little bit.
Yeah, no, please.
But at the very beginning of the case, as soon as that divorce is filed, the husband and wife are no longer in charge. They no longer can make their own decisions unless they're joint decisions, and they're in writing. And hopefully they have a lawyer. Both of them have their own separate lawyer. Otherwise, it's really difficult for you all because there's rules that had to be adhered to by the court. Every county, I deal with all the counties around here, but mainly Collin, Denton, and Dallas. And I deal all the peripherals too, but they all have what's called standing orders. Every county has standing orders that are attached to the petition. That's the pleading that starts the divorce. And those set forth the rules for the divorce. And those rules, in layman's terms, are you can't do anything unless you agree or we approve it. The judge approves it. Most of the time, 90% of the time, the parties approve that. We approve. So the first 2 questions I ask when a new client comes in, like they did at 8:30 this morning, is, all right, what are y'all going to do with the house? Are you going to keep it? Is she going to keep it? Or are y'all going to sell it? And have you talked about the terms? That's the first. Usually it's, no, we haven't, or yeah, we're splitting it, or I'm going to keep it and pay out of retirement, whatever. And so we've got to get that figured out. And hopefully there's another lawyer who's good and we can reach an agreement because you can't sell that house unless the court orders it or there's an agreement. And the agreements we write up normally are called Rule 11 agreements. And we file them.
Rule 11, write that down. Rule 11.
And so that has to happen in divorce. You have to have an agreement in writing to sell the house. It's not allowed without that. Sometimes the court orders it. Usually the court doesn't order it until at the end of the process. But a lot of times we want to get the process started now. It is, hypothetically, it is February. We know this divorce is going to last 6 or 8 months. We've got to get that house on the market by May 1 or April 1 or whatever y'all recommend. I know the summer is a hot month.
Nick, sorry to interrupt you. Would you recommend that before we work with someone that we ask for, hey, do you have a Rule 11?
Before you work with, if they're going through divorce, you've got to be in touch with both lawyers.
Okay, so we need both attorneys. One pulls us into the deal.
Don't necessarily take what the parties say as what it's actually the truth, because they may not know. Okay, it's important the lawyers are involved. That get both lawyers on an email stream and say, hey, they've come to me, or usually it's the lawyers recommend a realtor. I can get into that later on how we do that. But usually, it's, okay, we found this realtor and we're agreeing to put it on the market. And then, so, okay, well, what's the agreement on how we split this up? And the lawyers have to be involved in that. We have to have an agreement in writing during the divorce process. Of course, after the divorce process, it's in the decree. It's real easy.
Sure. Now, what happens in the instance that wife wants one real estate agent, husband wants another real estate agent, and they can't agree?
The judge decides.
And how do you become the agent that the judge awards?
I would say this. And it is a roundabout answer, but when a divorce client comes to me and they say, okay, we live in Waxahachie and we were going to get divorced and I want to sell the house and she does too, and her friend's a realtor, my friend's a realtor. I'm going to say, okay, you need a realtor who's that's their area. That's their area. I mean, I tell them, if I don't know someone there, I say, look at the most signs in the neighborhood. I want someone who knows the neighborhood.
Another reason to be a listing agent.
And so I want the most signs in the neighborhood, or whatever. Find out, make sure they have experience and that they know the neighborhood. They can speak to this neighborhood's hot. The one next door is not because something happened there a few years ago, or everyone knows those people are crazy, or whatever. So you need to find a realtor that's a specialist in that area. And if they want, I will. I can look. I actually have my paralegal look. But basically, they find a realtor. If they can't agree, we take it to the judge, and the judge says, okay, how much experience do they have? And is this area their specialty? Now, here's the other thing. Option 3, the judge has a realtor that the judge chooses. Sorry to deviate one more time.
No, this is great information.
The
Thank
parties
you.
can't agree even to sell the house or not, and the judge orders the house sold. Often the judge will order a appointment called a receiver, which is typically a realtor who gets 7%, not 6 or whatever, and they get a court order that gives them full authority to do everything: sign the listing, make the repairs, sell it, everything. And that's a last resort, and it rarely happens.
And that's called a receiver.
Receiver is appointed by the court.
Did they also have control over agreeing to the price?
100%. Wow. You don't want a receiver. That's what I find. No. I tell my folks, you don't want a receiver. You want to work together to this lady that you hate so much. You've got to work together because this benefits both of you. Honestly, most of the time, the lawyers work out who the realtor is. If the parties can't agree, I always say, I don't care if your cousin's a realtor. We're not using your cousin because he hates your cousin. Or he doesn't trust your cousin. He thinks your cousin's going to find his buddy to buy it low and sell it back to you 3 months later or something like that. But we just try to find a realtor that's knows the area and has some experience and communicate well with people who are in distress.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like there's 2 big sources for us to look for those divorce listings. The first is we can see right in the county who's getting divorced and contact them directly. Try to provide them with resources like an attorney if maybe both parties don't have one. And then the second would be to create authentic value-based relationships with family law attorneys where you specialize in selling. Do you feel uncomfortable when agents say, hey, can I take you to coffee? Like, what would be the best way for us to make a valuable relationship?
I'd prefer just to have a phone call or a Zoom.
Okay.
And kind of a get to know you. Tell me where you are. How long have you been there? What neighborhoods are you mainly in? And so I have an idea of what where I can provide value for my clients.
Perfect.
I say, hey, I've met this person. They seem very genuine and they have experience, and I think they'll work hard. I mean, what we want is the same thing as what our clients want. Is that's a realtor that'll not just put on MLS, but will do some marketing and hustle. And so that's what I want for my clients. Someone who will not just list it and get the 3%, but just go in there and do the video stuff and do the whatever the social media stuff, and get people there on. Every fourth Saturday from 1 to 3, and signs in the 17 yards on the way there, or whatever.
Right.
That's what we want. Once the thing's sold.
Awesome. So for some of the people in here who maybe have closed a lot of buyers and not a lot of listings, would you rather hear the truth? Like, hey, I want to work with you, and I work with a lot of buyers, but I haven't had a lot of listings. If I do a great job, will you give me a chance?
Yeah, yes, but the thing is, we also need buyers. We have they've already sold the house or is in the process of being sold. A lot of times they've sold the house or they're already in the process when they come see us, and then we have a pot of money. And at the end of the divorce, they want to buy.
Okay.
And so I don't know any buyer's agents, to be honest. I mean, I have a few agents that I know. And my office is in Allen, but we do all those counties, and we have briefcase will travel. But
so honesty is the best policy.
yeah, want to know really who you are, what you really do. Not just I do everything, or what do you really do best? Well, sure. Where can I direct? Because I'll have clients that have different needs, different personalities. I'll have clients that that some wives will just want to work with a female realtor. They'll just have more of a comfort.
Sure.
That's a big deal. It's real. They don't want to be intimidated by someone or feel like they're being bullied by someone or
This is really helpful. Thank you, Nick. I've always kind of wondered, like, where do we find people in a way that's not, predatory?
touch base with the lawyers and just say, and I do get some emails from time to time, but I don't really, emails don't do much for me. I mean, I get a lot of those junk emails, but just, you might just set up time just for a quick phone call or Zoom or whatever.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, Nick. How would you feel, or how would your paralegal react if I called or emailed and said, "Hey, I'm a realtor here in Frisco. I run into people all the time who are thinking about getting divorced. I'd like to talk to you because I'd like to have somebody to send my referrals to."
Yeah.
And then we get then I'll say, "Hey."
You say that
She'll give a little thing right away, right? Then when I'm in front of you, I'll say, "Oh, and by the way, if it's..."
Can you give us the script one more time?
I've got some potential referrals coming up, and
Right.
oh yeah, had Nick use something.
You book him, right?
So what you just said was, I want to make sure I'm rephrasing it correctly. We're looking to add an attorney to our database to refer our clients to.
Yeah, well, no, not our clients. Just say, "Hey, from time to time, we'll be out."
Yeah.
From time to time, I'm out hosting an open house or at a happy hour or something. I'll come across people that are getting divorced or thinking about getting divorced. As a realtor, people kind of come to us for referrals for everything because that's just the business, right? They hear you're a realtor. They want to know who. We just know a lot of people. So I don't really have anybody that I'm referring people to as far as a family attorney. I'd like to sit down there and just kind of see what you have to offer, and maybe I could start sending them to you.
Yeah,
And then
perfect.
Yeah.
That's the script right there. So
You definitely get in front of the lawyers that do family law. Research. You don't need a oil and gas lawyer, for these referrals. So family lawyers, get in front of them, and another probate lawyers, which I do probate work too. Some people just they're always looking for realtors. So
our January class is going to be on probate.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I'm not sure I answered the question.
Yeah, you did.
I want-
So we've pretty much talked about now, how do we get these people? Now, once we have them, and this question I'm going to ask Armando first, what are some things that we can do as a real estate agent to provide the highest level of service? What are some options that we can give them, and what are some things that we need to be aware of?
I want to lead with, I've had a lot of clients that have been in the are currently in the process of divorce, gotten divorced. And what I would recommend is, whether you've gone through it yourself or not, approach it with an abundance of patience and compassion and communication, because there's a lot of communication that's necessary to make it a good experience for your client. Now, if you have a client that is getting divorced and they want to buy a home, maybe both of them are going to leave the marital home, or one of them, and they need a loan to do that. The very first thing that I would do is ask them, "What's your plan?" "Well, we're going to split the house, and I want to move to a different location, or we want to stay in this school district," but whatever it is. Then the next question is, do you need a loan to do that? If the answer is yes, one of the top recommendations that I give clients is make sure you freeze your credit report. If it's not already frozen, freeze it. So you can, and I can send this data out, but basically you have the ability as a consumer to report to the credit bureaus to freeze your credit. In other words, nobody can take out credit in your name. No new credit can be established without your authorization. That's what freezing means. And you control that process, and it's a very simple process. But if you're going to buy another home and you need a loan to do that, you want to protect your credit. Why? Lenders look at credit as one of the factors to qualify, and it's one of the most important ones.
You don't
So-
want your spouse going and
Right.
putting much of things on.
Correct. So like if if it's contentious or not, you want to control your credit because that's going to influence how your financing looks. Now, the second thing is you need to inventory all the joint debt that you have. Okay. If you've been married a long time, you might have a lot that you don't even remember when you went and opened that card at Best Buy to get a deal on a refrigerator 10 years ago, and it's still open and it's a joint account. Okay. So you need to identify your joint credit. How do you do that? Get a copy of your credit report. All right. get a copy of your credit report. So on the joint credit, I recommend one of two things. Either close it because you're joint on it. So if your spouse, soon to be ex-spouse, is reckless and is not managing credit, you may have some problems with your credit report and you're obligated because you're joint on it. So identify those accounts, try to close them. But if you can't close them, monitor them. What do I mean by that? When is the payment due? Make sure that payment's made. Because if you're going to need a loan, the lender's going to look at your credit history, and they don't care if you're going through a divorce. They're going to just say, well, you weren't able to manage your credit through that situation. You're not a good risk. And you don't want that situation. So number one, freeze your credit report. Number two, identify the joint debts by pulling your credit report. We're trying to provide value to people in a difficult situation. So if you know, hey, listen, I'm not the lending expert. However, I know that if you know you need financing, credit is an important part of that. Let me get you with a lender to advise you. But here are some of the things I've learned that are important. Freeze the credit report. So it's always appropriate for the realtor to lead that conversation. But when it gets into the detail, I'm going to say, well, that's a law question. You're going to call Nick. Let's get you on the phone with Nick. Or that's a realtor question. I'm not a licensed agent. Let's call Kevin. Or that's a title question, let's call Susan. Or that's a lending question, let's call a licensed originator to get that answer. But you should always be leading that conversation because that goes back to what I was saying. It's communication. And look, I've had some clients, it's very amicable. I've had some that they were in tears at closing. Okay, there's a lot of emotions going on. And they're not thinking of everything. They're relying on you to help guide them. So take the lead in that, because if the outcome is, you provided value, they're going to send other people to you because people are compelled to send people to other people that provide value. So it's just leave with that. Yeah, go.
The other thing, Armando, is when you're dealing with the buyer. So for me, if I'm dealing with the wife, and I'll tell her to call Armando, and Armando's going to call and say, okay, here's what you need to do: freeze your credit, fill out an application. I need this, and also, in addition to everything that Armando says, she's got to think about getting the kids to school, and she's got to get the movers going.
Right.
So it never hurts to know the process that Armando's going to put her through, so that when you're out showing her a place, you could say, hey, Nancy, by the way, did you remember to freeze your credit? I know Armando might, and she probably didn't, right? Because we've got 100 other things going on. She's getting divorced. So it never hurts to know even the lender stuff, so that you can prompt your client. Then you'll be providing value to her too.
That's a good point. So like if your client needs a loan, the sooner you can get them with a licensed originator, the better, because there are steps. And the sooner those steps get in place, the smoother the process will be. Because last time I checked, nobody described the lending process as a fun, joyful time. It's stressful. I mean, we try to make it that way, but it's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of stress. I got another originator over here. Wouldn't you agree? Like it's stressful. So the sooner you can get that out of the way, you don't have to deal with that with all the other stuff that's going on. So a good originator is not going to charge your client, for a credit check. They'll do a soft credit check. There shouldn't be any cost involved to do that, to get them ready to see where they are.
So what would be some advice that you could give real estate agents so that they could provide more value in these situations from what you've seen?
And a lot of my answer is going to match yours as well. But once you know that the clients are divorcing, again, ask what status they are in. Are they just talking about it? Have they actually seen attorneys? Do they have a divorce decree? If they do have a divorce decree, we need a copy of it. Again, that's going to tell me at the very end. And truthfully, a lot of them they just want to know what the money they're going to receive from the house. So that's going to tell me how to prepare the closing statement, make sure I clear title, but also things that are helpful too. Let me know if if it's amicable relationship. Let me know if they're not talking to each other. Let me know if they don't want to be in the same room with each other. We've had that too. So that way my office, my team knows how to handle those situations. So I would need the attorney's contact information. Just anything that you can give me up front. It just helps with the communication with just everybody to a smooth closing. Because again, it's been mentioned, they're already going through things already. I've had people at closings, they don't even want the divorce. They'll sit there at closing, cry. They will sign it, but they did not want the divorce. So just kind of, yeah, just make me mindful of that. And
So here's a question that I'm sure a lot of you have experienced. Why does my spouse need to be on the contract if I bought the house?
one of my first questions would be, and it's almost always a yes, did your wife live in the house? If you bought the house by yourself, did your wife live in the house? Then technically she has an equitable right to that property.
And it doesn't matter if they're divorced?
Well, no, if you're married,
If they're still married.
if
Okay.
they're still married.
I deal with title companies a lot, and I have some frustration sometimes.
Yeah, because risk is different than the legal
Right.
rivalry.
But yeah, so I'm talking from a legal perspective. If you bought a house 1 hour before you got married, that is separate property. Period. 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 And afterwards, it's not community property. It doesn't matter whether they live together and husband bought the house, they got married 2 days later, or what. That is separate property. That's his, and the court can't touch it. Now there are reimbursement claims. Once you buy a house, it's separate property, and you move into the house, and then you use community property, whatever you make during the marriage, to pay the mortgage, that's a reimbursement claim. It's not a claim for equity. There's zero claim for equity.
But
It's
what-
reimbursement claims?
The question is, though, why does the spouse need to be on the contract? So is the answer that she doesn't?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I've fought title companies on that for years.
So if they bought the home before they were married, the spouse does not need to be on the contract.
If they bought it together, they sure do.
Right.
But if husband bought the home or wife bought the home before they got married, and then the other spouse moved in after the marriage, oh no, only the owner of that house needs to be on the contract, and that's my
That's awesome.
take on it. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then that's where he and I will differ because,
Yeah.
again, we're two different
Yeah, I
entities.
agree. They have different goals than we do.
Yeah.
Our underwriters will require.
And what I do is then I get on the phone with the lawyer and say, "Come on," and honestly, I'll say, and if it's an issue, sometimes it's not an issue. Okay, who cares?
Yeah.
But sometimes if it is an issue, I honestly will say, look, we'll find another title company, because you and I both know what the law is, lawyer guy, so
Interesting. Okay.
you just use not an issue. Usually it's not an issue, so I'll make a deal of it. But sometimes in a very contentious divorce, it's an issue.
Yeah. I personally am experiencing where it is an issue. That's good to know.
And I'm going to take that. I'm going to give myself a question. So I get this a lot. Hey, we're not divorced yet, but I found this great house and I want to go buy it. So the lender can still do the loan. However, if you're still married, and again, you got to check with your legal advisor, but if you're still married, your spouse is going to have to sign on the title. The lender's going to require that because in Texas it's community property. So they'll need to be at the closing, and they don't have to be on the loan. So in other words, they're going to get the property but no liability, which is not a great situation. But I get that question a lot. Hey, can I go buy? Well, yeah, you can buy it, but be aware your spouse, who's currently your spouse, is going to have to sign title. And Nick, if you want to add to that, because
Two things, and these coming in here, I wanted to talk about. First of all, yes, but again, let's say they sold the house right before they filed for divorce, so they have a big pot of money somewhere, and so the wife says she wants to go buy a house. She found a great house. That, you still got to get either a judge's permission or agreement of the parties in a written agreement, Rule 11 agreement, and so you still have to have agreement during the divorce. You can't just say I'm going to buy a house. It needs to be agreed. Now, here's the important thing: if the parties kind of agreed what the split is, or they've just sold the house and they're heading toward the end of the divorce, they need to get in place what's informally called a post-nup agreement, what's formally called a partition and exchange agreement that keeps that house, that creates it as a separate property house for the spouse buying it. And a lot of times, like we've settled a case, the money part of it, last November, and both of them bought houses in January, and then we tried the case. We had a 3-day trial in March over the kids, and but they both bought houses. We did a post-nup and made sure that what they had was their separate property, and everything went smooth. And they signed each other's papers. As soon as the divorce was finalized, they did deeds, and it wasn't an issue. But it has to be paperworked correctly.
in Texas, there's some rules around how much equity you can pull out of your home, right? and it's capped at 80% of the market value. So like just to do a simple example, if your home's worth $100,000, you could take up to $80,000 out minus what you currently owe. So if you don't owe anything, you get $80,000 minus your closing cost. If you have a loan, it's $80,000 minus the loan. That's your net. That's what you walk away with. So in a divorce situation, this comes up a lot. Well, like, hey, one of the parties is going to keep the home, but we want to divide the equity. I made half the down payment, or whatever the case may be, or we want to split it. How do you do that with the limitation of 80%? Has anybody run into that situation? So in other words, the state of Texas says that legally you cannot borrow more than 80% of the home's value and take that out as an equity loan.
Like if they have a $3 million home, I think they can only get.
Well, and those are lending rules. Certain lenders have limits on how much they'll give back to you, but you'll set that aside for a minute and just do a typical example. Let's just say we got a, $700,000 home. Well, let's do $500,000 home, and there's no loan on it, but both parties, put a big down payment. How do you get past that 80% limitation? Does anybody run into that situation? Okay, and I'm gonna defer to Nick because he's the legal expert here, and I don't want to play attorney on our panel here. But what I'm going to say is check with your legal advisor to see if you can write ulti-lien language into the decree so that you can go past the 80% rule. In other words, the lender will now, if you get approval from the judge, the lender will now allow you to borrow up to 95% of the market value. Everyone here has an audience meaning friends, family, people that and let them know that, hey, I've got some expertise in the field of people, that are thinking about getting divorced. I've got a group that are experts in each one of these aspects of it, and put that out there. Let them, you're kind of the go-to person to get them connected. You're not necessarily the expert on all that, but you can get them started. And the way I would do that on social media, talk about divorce. Why? I mean, I think the statistics are 50% of marriages end in divorce. So somebody knows somebody that's going through a divorce. I remember one time I sent out a postcard and I did it on the ulti-lien, and I got an immediate response from a friend of ours. Well, my sister's going through a divorce. Can you help us understand how this ulti-lien might work for us? So you got to communicate to your audience that you have some level of expertise in this, and you've built a support group to help your clients navigate that time in their lives, a lender, a title company, an attorney, and a realtor yourself. So put it out there, communicate.
As far as somebody approaching you, I know that you said build a relationship. Now, as I was saying, like when I was on my sabbatical, I was looking at different things on how to get into that niche. And there was this company that approached me, and I had these little books, how to survive a divorce, had my picture on there and all that kind of stuff. So I still got the books, but I started calling attorneys, and one person did let me come by there and drop a book. Others did not. And how would you be receptive to that? And is there any type of attorney that I should run away from? Or meaning, is somebody going to be like, well, if you give me 50% of the proceeds, I'll refer some people. Is that even legal to do that?
They can't do that, so don't worry about that.
Okay.
But the ones that ask for that run away from them, But no, I think that as lawyers, I welcome, items that they receive from outside sources that provide value to my clients. There's books out there, there's pamphlets, there's counselors, there's reunification therapists, there's CPAs, there's people who specialize in divorces that I like to have their information. I keep it and I'll give it to because I'm not an expert in everything. I feel like I know people that are experts, and I like to get to know more of them. If you have a resource that I can hand to and say, look, read through this, and you'll get maybe peace of mind, you have more information about this aspect of it, I'd be very receptive to that. Yeah.
I had a quick question on a topic we talked about a little earlier. Nick, right?
Yeah.
Nick, you mentioned something about judges are usually the ones that decide on the realtor in certain situations if the lawyers haven't worked it out already. What parameters are they using to decide that, other than being a neighborhood expert? What are they using to determine, and how are they finding them? Are they having someone run a Google search to see who has 5-star reviews in that category? Do they have a database? Yeah, the judges.
Oh, no, they'll just say, each lawyer give me three realtors or 2 realtors. And they'll probably just go Google them.
And who are they going to saying that?
The lawyers.
They're going to the lawyers saying, give me 3 realtor options.
One of the other lawyers will file a motion and say, motion to appoint realtor. And the lawyer will say, we can't agree. And the judge will give me you should give me 2 and I'll pick one.
Okay.
And then they'll do an order appointing that realtor.
So you seem really knowledgeable as an attorney, and the fact that you're saying being very specific. I had a very non-specific attorney in my divorce, and so I would never recommend him. And so, how do you know? How do you know if you just start marketing to attorneys? You don't want to market to someone, build a relationship with someone who's not going to do right by your client, right? And you don't know that because you don't know their work. How do you evaluate an attorney's work to know if they're really someone who's good, who's going to really take care of your client? Because I was in that situation and I know.
Okay, look at outside. There's a lot of these awards that you just buy them and you send them to visits and you apply. But look at the real awards. Look at superlawyers.com. Here's the most important one. Look at AVO, AVVO.com. They do lawyer ratings.
One more time.
AVVO.com, AVO.com. They may pronounce it AVO.com, but lawyers cannot manipulate those ratings. If a lawyer is a 10.0 on AVO, then there's nothing. There's no glitch in their history. They have all these stellar reviews. Look at reviews on Google and Yahoo, but look at reviews on AVO. AVO is now tied in with lawyers.com, and so there's a combination of information. So AVO.com is a great resource, as is superlawyers.com. A lot of the other lawyer ones, the D Magazine's top, a lot of those, the firms just all vote for each other. It's just,
That was the worst experience I ever had with an attorney, was the list from D Magazine.
Yeah, those are popular. Those are lawyers. They all say, let's all vote for each other, and then we all get it, and we have a big party, and blah blah blah. But Avo.com's there's our own manipulation. We don't even know what the formula is. I mean, we can't manipulate it. So
I think the Google ratings, a lot of them you read, it was like, well, the reception was mean to me, or I called and they never called me back, 1 star. So those can be skewed too.
The one thing I've also noticed about attorneys is that people think fees equal competence, and that's not always accurate. There's a big law firm downtown that I spent a decent amount of money with, and it was someone similar to yourself who finished my case for a portion of what it would cost. So don't always think that the most expensive attorney means the best attorney.
Or that the big firms are better than small firms.
Yeah, they're great for big corporations with big pockets. For you as an individual, maybe not so much.
Family law cases are individual cases. There's individual attorneys, and we have a team, but you don't need 17 lawyers on a divorce case. You need one good divorce lawyer with a good team.
Now, if the divorce is done, but for kids, they haven't made a decision and she wants to get the full custody, do you help with that also?
Yeah. You got all sorts of custody disputes. Whether the divorce is done or not, you can always modify kid stuff. You can't modify property stuff. You can modify kid stuff.
Yeah, the divorce is done and she bought a house and everything, and he has a house, but the son is in between, She wants to get full custody.
That's a post-divorce modification case. We do those all day, every day.
Okay. Thank you.
The purpose of freezing your credit when you're in the midst of thinking about or in the process of getting divorced is so that you control your credit history. So someone couldn't, your spouse couldn't open up a credit card in your name, or charge, ask for an additional line of credit. It's just to protect your credit. And again, it's a precaution just to make sure that because your credit is going to be a factor in getting a new home loan. And as a general rule, it's not a bad idea to freeze your credit report when you're not utilizing it.
Any last questions? Thank you all for being such an amazing audience. Thank you to our expert panelists.